This is Unit 6, Polygons in Motion. Preview video 6.2, Parallelograms. Sit tall, close your eyes, ready, inhale. Hold your breath. And birthday candle. Make sure you get a date, time, and location. So we're going to be talking about the next week quadrilaterals, four-sided shapes. And there's a variety of quadrilaterals. I'd like you to pause this video and see if you can name as many of the following quadrilaterals as you can. Pause the video, name them, restart. Okay, let's see if you were to name them all. This would be a trapezoid. This would be a parallelogram. This would be a rhombus. Of course, a rectangle. And a square. And believe it or not, a shape that has four sides and congruent consecutive sides, not all the way around congruent, that would be a rhombus. That's called a kite. And that is a geometric shape. So we're going to be focused for the next 3 lessons on these quadrilaterals. This is called the quadrilateral family tree. So a quadrilateral is the generic for any four-sided shape. And then you have 3 branches in this family. You have the parallelogram family, which means a rhombus and a rectangle are descendants of or related to a parallelogram, and a rhombus and a rectangle, a square, is related to both. So this is one branch of the family tree. Then trapezoid is another branch, trapezoid and an isosceles trapezoid. That makes 2 sides equal. What makes a parallelogram is opposite sides parallel, which is true of all 4 of these shapes. What makes a trapezoid is one set of parallel sides. And then a kite has its own branch all by its lonesome because it's just so amazingly unique. This is called the quad family tree with all the corresponding characteristics. What makes a quad a quad? Take a close look because you're going to have this pretty close to memorized. A quad is a quad when it has 4 sides. And a quad is a quad because all the angles sum 360. Now that's true of all of these shapes. They have 4 sides, they sum 360. Today we're going to focus strictly on the parallelogram and what makes a parallelogram a parallelogram. There are 5 qualities that make a parallelogram a parallelogram. The first quality is the definition of a parallelogram, is the fact that opposite sides are parallel. Go figure. Then you have opposite sides are congruent in length. Notice the hatch marks don't match all the way around. It's the opposite side pairs that are congruent. If they matched all the way around, we'd be a rhombus. Third quality is that the opposite angles are congruent. So these angles are going to be congruent to each other in a parallelogram, and these angles are going to be congruent to each other in a parallelogram. This is easier to see. A parallelogram has parallel sides, so let's stretch them out. They're parallel. And this would be a transversal. I called it a stereostick, and we learned this way back in Unit 3, that consecutive angles in parallel lines add up to 180. Consecutive interior angles. Consecutive angles are supplementary. Last, the diagonals bisect each other, which means if I draw one diagonal, then I draw another diagonal, this diagonal cuts through its midpoint going one way, and the other diagonal cuts through the midpoint going the other way. They bisect each other. Warning, I did not say the diagonals cut those corners in half. That's going to be a rhombus and a square. We're not there yet. But the diagonals cut each other in half, or another way to conceive of it is the diagonals cross at each other's midpoints. Now, we have an acronym here to help you remember these 5 qualities, which you should memorize. Opposite, 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 consecutive, diagonal. Think OCD. Say it with me. Say OCD. Opposite, 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 consecutive, diagonal. Say that with me. Opposite, 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 consecutive, diagonal. Opposite sides are parallel. Opposite sides are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. Consecutive angles are supplementary. Diagonals bisect each other. Keep in mind these 5 qualities as we do the next 3 problems. It says, if wave, W-A-V-E, is a parallelogram, find the measure of all possible angles. So in O, C, D, these two, this O, opposite angles are congruent and consecutive angles are supplementary. These two relate to angles. Let's see what we can do here. Step number 1. If opposite sides are parallel, and opposite angles are congruent, if this whole thing is 84, this whole thing is also 84. Which means if I want the measure of this green angle here, I simply go 84 minus 41, and I get that green angle is going to be 43. Now, because I have parallel lines, I can go armpits of the Z, which means this is 43. And I can also go armpits of the Z this way, which means this is 41. Now, I have a 95 here. This 95, vertical angle 95. That's a linear pair, so to get this angle, that's going to be 180 minus 95. And that gets me 85, which means this is 85. You just keep working what you know to be true. And I know that triangles add up to 180. So I can do this. 95 and 43. And take that away from 180. We get 42. And then this triangle also adds up to 180. So we can go like this. 41, 85. Get 126, take that away from 180. And we get 54, which you can check your work by adding 54 and 82. We get 96. That means this is 96. Armpits of the Z would make this 54 and this 42. Last but not least, you can check if you add 96 and 84, we get 180. There's your check because consecutive angles add up to 180. Look at all the information you get just when you know a shape is a parallelogram. Said the shape below is a parallelogram, find both variables and segment lengths. So we're trying to find segment lengths and variables. And what are we working with here? We're working with the diagonals. And in OCD, the diagonals bisect each other. Therefore, this is a midpoint going this way. This is a midpoint going that way. That is what enables us to solve. So we just found that 5 is F, and if I do 3 times 5, that's 15, plus 5, that gives us 20. 4 times 5, 20, that's like your little check. Yes, it works. Come over here. G equals 3, that would make this 9 and that 9, and there's your check. This one you're going to do on your own. You're to solve for all variables and angles. Pause the video. Do this on your own. Pause. Okay, students, welcome back. Hopefully you actually did this on your own and you're just checking your work. We're dealing with angles here, so OCD. We're dealing with this. Opposite angles are congruent. And we're dealing with consecutive angles are supplementary. Which means if I go opposite angles here, 5H equals 125, which means H equals 25. There's your first variable. Now you're like measures. We know consecutive angles add up to 180. So if this is 125, whatever this angle is, it has to add up to 180. So 180 minus 125. We get 55, which means this right here is 55. And you can solve for the remaining variables. 7k minus 1 is 55. K equals 8. And then here is 11j equals 55. So j equals 5. Check your work. Write notes of correction.